80% of your results will come from 20% of your activities. And the 20/80 rule says that the first 20% of the time you spend planning your goal and organizing your plan will be worth 80% of the time and effort required to achieve the goal. What's up, beautiful people? Happy Wednesday and welcome to the 16th episode of the Leaders Lab podcast. I am super excited about today's continued series. 2 weeks ago, I started a new series that is primarily focused on being a multi-passionate entreleader and how to not lose balance in the process. You can be a successful multi-passionate entreleader and manage multiple brands and businesses, but you must have organization and management skills. And for those of you who are just tuning into our podcast, we said a couple of weeks ago that the term multi-passionate entrepreneur was actually coined by Marie Forleo in the early 2000s. And so we took it a little step further with multi-passionate entreleadership, because we're talking about entrepreneurs who are also leaders in their field and also leaders who are entrepreneurs. They do more than just work in their specific maybe career. They're also leaders in their business with their brands, their projects as well. And last week, we talked about the 5 steps to go from clutter to clarity. And step 1 was write them down. So we talked about brain dumping 101. So you had to write down all the ideas that were in your mind. The second thing you had to do was review and organize. And the third step was process of elimination. After you go through all of this, it's great. We have all of these amazing ideas. Next thing we got to do is start weeding out duplicates, right? Things that could be maybe sub ideas to the main ideas. Then in step 4, we had to identify and categorize themes that may have shown themselves within our categorization in the different ideas and things that we came up with from the brain dump. Then the 5th step was the next round of elimination. Now, honestly, you can go through the process of elimination as many times as necessary, because we have to go from clutter, all of these amazing ideas jumbled up in our minds and our brains, to clarity, finding out which ideas are worth going after, implementing, right? And so this week, we are talking about how to set goals with this newfound clarity that you have and how to create an action plan with those goals. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is how to set your goals like a boss, okay? How to set your goals like a boss. So let's first consider the primary thing. What matters most to you? When you're thinking about your goals, of course, now we've already done the brainstorming stuff. We've gone through the ideas. We've gone through everything that we have in our minds and that we want to implement. So the first thing is, what are the goals that we have, right? What's the goals that we have? What are our values? And the values are the things that you believe are important to you in the way you live and the way you work. Some examples of my values are authenticity, transparency, consistency, being disciplined, adventurous, going out there, traveling, seeing the world, communicative. Communication is like one of my highest priorities and values in life. Being passionate about what you love to do and doing that with all your heart and your energy. Fearlessness is one of my values. Optimism, being a very optimistic person. And then also support, being a supportive individual. Now, when you have your values, and some of my values may also be some of yours as well, but when you have your values and you know what they are, the next thing that you need to do is align your values with your goals. And the way you align your values with your goals is you think about first, well, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to accomplish, and how will that align with what I truly believe in? What I truly adhere to in my own life, what I value. And when you think about how, what you want to do to accomplish your goals, the next thing, of course, is how does that align? How do these goals align with your values? Okay, so how do your goals align with your values? And the way you can align your values and your goals is, first of all, you got to clarify your goals. Know exactly what it is that you want to do. Get clear on your goals. And you can do this by refining them as much as necessary without losing the overall fundamentals of your desired outcome. Right? So you have to refine your goals, get clear on them, know exactly what it is, because these are your goals. These are not goals that you're setting by societal standards. These are your goals. These are not goals that you're setting from some, an influencer that you see on social media. These aren't goals that you're setting from another entreleader. These aren't goals that you're setting from any other factor, any other influence. These are literally the goals that matter to you most. Okay. So after you clearly define your goals and you align them with your values, the next thing you need to figure out is your metrics. Metrics is how we measure something. Okay. So how will you plan to measure your progress as you go along your journey to reaching your goal? And you have to set a deadline. Allow for a little bit of flexibility here, because life happens, things happen. And so as you are trying to set your goals, remember to have a little bit of flexibility. Let's say if you wanted to publish a book, you said, I want to publish a book and I want to complete it by, I don't know, what's this? This is April. What's this? This is April 21st. Let's say you say, I want to finish a book by September 21st. Okay, fine. Give yourself a little leeway, because honestly, you may finish the book before. Or if something happens in life that kind of throws you off course, then honestly, you may end up finishing after. And so you want to make sure that you give yourself a little bit of flexibility, and also create mini progress checks along the way. Okay, create mini progress checks along the way. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, because now we have our video podcast available on YouTube, if you're watching this and you're getting some value out of this, I ask you to please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Also, subscribe to the Leaders Lab podcast on YouTube, and also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Castbox, all of them, so you can continue to get these amazing weekly updates. Okay, so let's continue with the next thing to do. So after you have set up these mini progress checks along the way, now you are clear to go into the most important thing, creating your action plan. Okay. So this is what we're getting into the nitty gritty of it, Fred. Okay. We're getting to the nitty gritty. Now you're going to create your action plan, and you're going to make a list of everything that you will have to do in order to reach your goal. So think about that. Now, by this point, you should be used to making lists, because you had to make a list when you did your brain dump. You were doing your brainstorming process, and then you went and you organized them and made sure that everything aligned according to this organization, like the clarity, right? Getting your clarification down pat. And now you are doing the same in terms of your goals with these ideas. And so make a list of everything that you want to do and that you need to do in order to reach your goal. And the next thing you need to do is identify potential obstacles. Consider alternative methods to reaching your goal if any obstacle arises. This is how we create alternative solutions. Solutions are so necessary for your strategic plan, for your action plan, because you don't want to just say, well, here's my plan, this is exactly what I'm going to do, and then something happens and you're stuck. You're stuck because you didn't plan. This is what we call contingency planning, right? You didn't plan for an obstacle. So we want to do that. Think about any potential issue or obstacle that could arise, and then create a solution for that. Then go through your list and prioritize the steps that are most important. Prioritize the steps that are most important, and ask yourself these two questions. One, if I could only do one thing that's on this list, to reach my goal, what would be the most important thing? That's the thing you're going to do first. Okay. If I could only do one thing on this list, what would be the most important thing? The second question you want to ask yourself is, well, if I can do any other task on this list, which would go next. And so that means I got my first task down, and now I have my second task down. So after you have these two, now you can start looking at the others and create a sequence of priority, right? So we have the first task we would do, the second task that we would do, the third task. And so this is now how you're forming an action plan. You have already found your goals. You've already prioritize them. You've already also made sure that your goals align with your values. Now you're putting them in sequence from first, second, third, all the way down from most important to least important. So now you have a sequence of priorities from the list that you just created. The 80-20 rule says that 80% of your results will come from 20% of your activities. Think about that. Okay. No, seriously, let's just think about that for a moment. 80% of what you accomplish or not comes from 20% of what you do or not do. Okay. So that's the 80-20 rule. Okay. It says 80% of your results will come from 20% of your activities. Now, let's flip that thing around and look the other way. The 20-80 rule says that the first 20% of time that you spend planning your goal and organizing your plan will be worth 80% of the time and effort required to actually achieve the goal. So Brian Tracy, he's a well-known businessman. He said that every minute spent on planning saves 10 minutes on execution. Think about that. Think about it. Every minute that you spend on planning saves 10 minutes on execution. This means that you got together, you have your plan, you've written it all out, and now instead of jumping straight in, being completely spontaneous and reckless, okay? Now I do want to say not all spontaneity is reckless, okay? Because I can be a little spontaneous at times without being reckless. But I'm just saying when it comes to your goals, and you don't have some type of action plan, yes, that's reckless. That's considered being reckless, right? Because what you're doing is you're creating unnecessary extra tasks for you to do simply because you weren't prepared. Planning is preparation, and it is not a curse word. Planning is not a curse word. Being prepared actually helps you in the short, right now in the short term, and also in the long term. Making sure that you have a well thought out plan is more than half the battle. More than half the battle. Because if you have a plan that is carefully organized, orchestrated, you have everything prioritized, and you begin to start going from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. If at any time something happens during the plan, something happens during the process to where you're not seeing the results that you expect to see, since you have this carefully thought out plan, this carefully written plan, now you can take steps back to see where you went wrong, or to see maybe necessarily if it's not where you went wrong, but where the plan needs to be adjusted. So you can go back and do it again. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, if I have to go back and do it again, that's also wasting time. Not as much time will be wasted with having a plan as opposed to not having a plan, and you're just out here saying, well, I'm just throwing these spaghetti noodles up against the wall and seeing which one will stick. You're gonna waste a whole pack of noodles. I know this is like the most random the most random type of example to use, but I'm saying you have to use some type of plan. You have to have some type of action plan if you are serious about your goals. If this is something that you're just trying and you're just experimenting with, then you might not necessarily need a plan. However, if you are doing more than just experimenting, then you want to take into consideration what the 80-20 rule says. 80% of your results will come from 20% of your activities. And the 20-80 rule says that the first 20% of the time you spend planning your goal and organizing your plan will be worth 80% of the time and effort required to achieve the goal. Remember what I said to you last week? I said that in order for you to really master your brand, your project, master your life, right? You have to manage it. And I said, tweet that, because that's the tweet this. You have to manage it in order to master it. And actually, you can at Dr. Charity TV, because I want to know that, you're listening to the podcast, you're watching the podcast, and you got that, right? So tweet this. You have to manage it in order to master it. And it's so true. It's so true. Think about it. Once again, let's come back. Managing, planning and managing, they go hand in hand. Okay. When you are creating an action plan, you are creating a step-by-step guide for your management of your time, management of your day, management of your goals, your project management, and sometimes also too, your personal management, relational management, communication. In order to master it, you do have to manage it. And so think about the time that you spend on planning. It's going to save you time that you spend in execution, because you're not going to be so busy trying to run around figuring out how to do this or how to do that. And no, remember, Brian Tracy said each minute spent on planning saves 10 minutes on execution. I love it. I love it. So last week we talked about brain dumping. We talked about, going from just clutter, having all of these amazing ideas, to clarity, going from clutter to clarity, and trying to get yourself together, making sure that you have everything nicely written out and organized. And then this week we talked about creating an action plan. Now, next week, I'm excited, because next week we're going to talk about what to do with this newfound action plan. Okay. Next week, we are going to talk about taking your new plan of action and strategically scheduling it into a comprehensive plan through actually one of my personal experiences that I'm going to be sharing as an example, just so you can have an idea of what to do. Got it? Okay, good. Okay. So listen, I want to thank you so much for listening and tuning in to the Leaders Lab podcast today. I believe that this series is going to help so many of you with your ideas, and to help you go from concept to creation to consistent execution, because that's overall the goal. That is the overall goal. And so I do want to say, subscribe to the Leaders Lab podcast. You can download today's episode by going to www.DrCharityTV.com/the Leaders Lab podcast. Or you can also just go to Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify or Castbox, or even if you're on Anchor.fm, you can go there as well and find the Leaders Lab podcast with Dr. Charity TV. And now, of course, you can also come straight to youtube.com/Dr. Charity TV and catch up with all the latest and greatest for the Leaders Lab podcast. We're only on our second video episode, but there's so many other videos that are up there on Dr. Charity TV YouTube channel, so you can check that out as well. Please, please, please remember to share this podcast so that we can continue to reach millennial entreleaders all across the globe. Thank you so much for tuning in this time, and I will see you next week in the lab.
Thank you for listening to the Leaders Lab podcast. Visit our website at www.drcharitytv.com.